Hey guys, welcome back to our Flutter UI design tutorial series. Today, we're going to continue improving our Flutter UI building skills by recreating this chat app design that I've found on Dribble. By the end of this video, among other things, you'll have a better understanding of how to use the stack widget in combination with the position widget. So without any further ado, let's start coding. As always, I've already gone ahead and created a starter project to save us some time. So here we have our asset images that we will be using for the avatars. Then in the main.dart, we have the main method that runs my app. My app is a stateless widget that returns a material app. The home property of the material app is set to my homepage. Now my homepage is the class where we are going to build our UI. It's a stateful widget, and for now it only returns an empty scaffold. Now let's start with this header section. But before we do, let's add the background color to the scaffold. And also for the body, we'll add a column for now. I will explain why we'll need to change it later. Now the first thing in this header will be a row of two icon buttons. So let's come here and add a row. And inside this row, we will add the two icon buttons. Let's quickly add them. They are not positioned correctly. Let's fix that by wrapping the row with the padding widget. And we will only need to add padding at the top, left, and right. Now, to create some space between the two icon buttons, we will set the main axis alignment of the row to space between. Now for this section, we will assume that it is scrollable. That means instead of a row, we will use a list view. So we will come here after the padding and add the list view. As expected, since we are adding a list view inside the column, we have this error here. And to fix it, we could come here and wrap the list view with an expanded widget. But since in this case we will be scrolling on the horizontal axis, we just need to wrap it with a size box widget. We'll give it a height of 50. Now the error is gone. Let's continue to add the first text button inside the list view. We will also use the size box widget to create some space before the next button. Now, because we set the size box height to 50, to see the button that we just created, we need to set the scroll direction of the list view to axis horizontal. And as expected, the button is showing now. Now to add these other buttons, we just need to come here, copy this block of code and paste it many times. Now we just need to change the text and the color of the buttons to gray. The list view seems to be okay. The only thing missing is some paddings to the left. Let's add it using the padding property of the list view. That's pretty much it for the header section. Now let's continue building the rest of the UI. And one thing that we need to consider here is that we have widgets on top of other widgets. That means we will have to use the stack widget. So instead of using a column for the body of the scaffold, we will use a stack widget. More precisely, we will wrap the existing column with a stack widget. Now this column here will only be used for the header section. And to create this favorite contact section, we'll come down here under the column and add a position widget. And as a child, we will give it a container. Let's give it a height of 220 and a color so that we can see it. And since we are inside of a stack, our new container covers the column that we created for the header section. And this is where the positioned widget comes in. We can now use its properties to position our container exactly where we want it on the screen. So we will come here, set the top to 190 and the left and right to 0 so that it expands to the entire width of the screen. Now for the rounded corners, we will use the decoration property of the container. It takes a box decoration. Now we have this error because we cannot set both the decoration and color property of the container at the same time. In other words, if we are using the decoration property, we must set the color inside of it. Now let's continue to add the rounded corners. We will use the border radius property and set it to border radius only, top left radius circular 40, and the same thing for the top right. Now to lay out those widgets inside the container, we will use a column. So we'll come here and set the column as a child for the container. Then for this first row, since it has a similar layout to that one in the header, to save us some time, we will come here, copy this row, and paste it there. Now we simply need to change this search icon here, and also replace this icon button by a text widget. Let's give it a white color. And finally, we will use the padding property of the container to create some space between the row and the edge of the container. Now for this list of contacts, we will use a list view with a scroll direction horizontal. So we will come here under this row and add a list view. And as we did earlier, to avoid this error, we will wrap it in a size box. We'll give it a height of 90 and also set the scroll direction of the list view to axis horizontal. Each item in the list view will be a column of a circle avatar with an image in the background and a text widget. Let's start by adding the column. Then the circle avatar. We'll give it a radius of 29, and for the background image, we will use the image.asset and pass in the path of the image in our asset folder. Since the background image takes an image provider, we need to add .image at the end. Don't forget to add your asset path in the pubspec.yaml file. Now, to add this white border around the circle avatar, there are many approaches that we could use, but a simple one that I've found is to wrap this circle avatar with another circle avatar. Then set the radius to something higher, like 32, and the background color to white. And finally, let's add some space using the size box widget, then the text widget for the name of the contact. We'll give it a white color and set the font size to 16. Now, to create the other items in the list, we will come here, extract this column in a method, and duplicate the method many times. But before we do that, one thing you can notice is that this contact avatar is used at different places in the UI, down there and also in the drawer. So before we extract the column in a method, let's first extract this user avatar in a widget. Let's add a property for the file name, add it in the constructor of the widget and in the build method. Let's go back to the widget up here and set the file name that we just created. Now that's done, let's extract the column in the method. We'll call it build contact avatar. Let's add the parameters, one for the name of the contact and the other one for the file name of the image. Now we will go back to the method here, add the correct values, and duplicate it multiple times. To fix this issue with the spacing, we just need to come here in the method, wrap the column with a padding, and set it to edge and set only right 20. To finish, let's come here and set those methods with the correct names and images. Now let's move to this section, and as we did earlier, we will again use the positioned widget to place this container on top of the green one. So we'll come here under the first position widget, but still inside the stack, and add a new position widget. We'll pass it a container as a child, and for the color, we will directly use the decoration property because we know we will need it later to create the rounded corners. Since the container is inside the position widget and doesn't have a specific height, it covers the entire screen. And to fix that, we will again use the properties of the position widget as we did earlier. Now, to see the container, we could come here and give it a height. But as you can see, it's not that simple, since the container has to fill the rest of the screen. That means we will need to do some calculations involving the media query to get the height dynamically. Fortunately, we don't need to do all that. We can just use the bottom property of the position widget and set it to 0. That means the container will be stretched from the top at 365 to the bottom at 0. Now, to finish with this container, we can come here, copy the code for the rounded corners of the green container and paste it there. Here inside the container, we have a list view of custom widgets. So let's come here and add the list view as a child of the container. And since this list view doesn't have a column as ancestor in the widget tree, we don't have any error this time. Now for this custom widget, we will use a main row and another row inside of it. The inner row will be used to lay out the user avatar here and this column of two text widgets. Then at the end, in the main row, we will use another column to lay out the time and the notification alert. So let's start by creating the first row, then the second row inside of it. For this avatar, we will use the user avatar widget that we created earlier. Now the column for the two text widgets. To save time, we will just copy and paste the text widgets. Let's change the color of the text widgets. And also use the cross-axis alignments of the container to make them align to the left. Let's add some space between the text using the size box widget. We will give it a height of 5. And also some space between the user avatar and the column, again using the size box widget, but this time, since we are inside a row, we will set its width to 15. Now for the paddings, we'll do it in 2 steps. We'll first add a padding in the list view, only to the left, and then another padding in the container on the vertical axis. Let's finish this row by adding those widgets at the end. For that, we'll come here inside the main row and add a column. Inside this column, we'll add a text widget for the time, then a circle avatar for the notification alert. We'll give it a radius of 7, a background color, and as a child, another text widget. Let's add some space between the time and the notification alert using the size box widget. Now, to push our new column to the right, let's go to the main row and set its main axis alignment to main axis alignment space between. The column is too close to the edge, so let's wrap it in a padding, edge inset only, right 25, and top 5. Now, one last thing to finish with this item is to add this divider at the bottom. For that, we'll come here, wrap the main row in a column, then come down here and add the divider under it. To create this indentation, we can use the indent property of the divider and set it to 70. Now, to finish with this section, we just need to duplicate this item many times. And to do that, we'll come here and extract this column in a method. We'll call it build conversation row. Let's create the parameters for a new method. A string for the name, one for the message, another one for the file name, and finally, an int for the message count. Let's quickly replace them in the method body. Now we can come here in the method and pass in the arguments, then duplicate the method. For the notification alerts, we'll show them only if the message count is greater than 0. For that, we'll come here above the circle avatar in the column and add this condition. That means it will show this circle avatar only if the message count is greater than 0. I think we're done with this section. Now let's continue to create this floating action button. For that, we'll come here under the stack, but still inside the scaffold, and add a floating action button. We'll give it an icon as a child. Then a background color. The floating action button is too small, so we'll use the size box widget and set its width and height to 65. And finally, to put it a little lower on the screen, we'll use the floating action button location and set it to floating action button location and docked. I think we're done with this section. Now let's move to the creation of this drawer. The idea is when the user taps on this button, it should open this drawer on the left side of the screen. So to start, we'll come here and use the drawer property of the scaffold to add a drawer to our design. Let's give it a width of 275 and a slightly transparent background color. Now to open our drawer, we will need to come here and create a global key of type scaffold state, then initialize it. Next, we will come here and set the scaffold key to our global key. Then we will go to the onPress callback of the icon button and call the global key current state open drawer method. Now if we click here, it will open our drawer on the left. Now we can open the drawer. Let's come here, and as a child, we will add a column that we will use to lay out the items in the drawer. For the first item, we'll use a row and add an icon and a text widget inside of it. So let's come here, add the row, the icon, a size box for some space, and then the text widget. Now we need to add some paddings around the column. We'll use the from left top right bottom constructor of the edge and set class. Let's create this second item in the list. So again, we'll use a row, and inside of it, we will add our user avatar widget that we created earlier. It takes a file name, then a text widget for the username. As always, we will use the size box to create some space between them. For this group of options here, since they are very similar to this one, we can come here, copy this row, and paste it there. Again, we will use the size box to create some space. Now, instead of copying and pasting this row many times, we'll convert it to a new widget. We'll call it drawer item. We'll need two properties for this new widget, a string for the title and an icon data for the icon. Let's add them to the constructor, and also we place them in the build method. Let's add the correct values for the first item, then duplicate it many times to create the other items in the list. They are too close to one another. To fix that, we'll come here in the build method and wrap the row in a padding. We'll add the padding only at the bottom. Let's add this divider and set its color to green. We'll also give it a height of 35. For this invite friend option, we will again use our drawer item widget. Now, for this logout option, we could come here and add another drawer item widget in the column. The issue with this approach is that there isn't an easy way to push it down to the bottom. So a way to solve this is to come here, wrap this column with another column. Then we can come here, move this item inside the column that we just created, so that we have only two items inside this column, and then we can use the main axis alignment property of the column and set it to space between to create this empty space between this column and the logout item below it. To make the drawer items clickable, we'll come here and wrap the padding in an inkwell. Now, to make those corners rounded, we'll come here, use the shape property of the drawer, and set it to a rounded rectangle border. We'll set its border radius to border radius horizontal, right, radius circular 40. Now we need to add those shadows behind our drawer. But before that, we must remove this transparent layer that covers our background. For that, we'll go all the way up here in the Material app and use this theme property, which takes a theme data, then the drawer theme, which takes a drawer theme data, to set the screen color to colors transparent. Now the screen color is gone. To add the shadows behind the drawer, we'll come here and wrap this padding in a container. Then we will use the decoration property of the container to finally add the black color to the drawer. As you can see, this color has some transparency in it so that we can see the items in the background. Since our container now covers the drawer, we need to also add the rounded corners to the container. For that, we can just copy this border radius property here and paste it there. Now we can use the box shadow property of the decoration box to set the shadows. I think we have successfully completed this design, at least the way I understood it. Don't forget to leave your suggestions and questions in the comment below. And since you made it so far, please give us a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.